Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. We're excited that you've joined us. Our topic today is how to govern identities and access in cloud infrastructure. AppsFlyer, a case study. Great, we're going to be talking at a real practitioner level here, some real, I think, practical advice and good information I think all of us will benefit from. Our webinar today is sponsored by Ermetic. My name is Mitch Ashley, and I will serve as your host and moderator. A few housekeeping items. We're recording the webinar, so everyone who's registered participating in the webinar will get an email with a link to the recording, and we'll also send you a copy of the slides. So you don't have to take super detailed notes, just sit back, absorb the information. But remember, we do love questions, so we'd love to have you enter any questions you have into the questions tab of the GoToWebinar software. We'll be getting to those a little bit later in our webinar. Feel free to jump in with anything you might have. I'm sure that our speakers today would love to entertain your questions. Also, we are giving away 4 Amazon gift cards at the end of the webinar, so stick around, find out if you're a winner. Hope another at least 4 of you will. So let's move on to our topic, how to govern identities and access in cloud infrastructure, AppsFlyer case study. We have 2 speakers today. I'm very happy to introduce you to both Guy Flechter, who is CISO at AppsFlyer, and also Eric Gumnowski, who is CBO and co-founder at Ermetic. So let's get right to it. I'm going to hand it over to, I believe Guy is speaking first. Take it away.
Hi, so this is Eric Gumnowski, and thanks, Mitch, for the introduction. I don't know if all of you are aware about this, but it's it came out in the recent research that Gartner have published that the majority of the security failures in modern production cloud-based environments, such as AWS or Microsoft Azure or the Google Cloud Platform, are not attributed to what people might think are security misconfigurations or issues with network security, but actually come as a result of challenges organizations are facing in management of what we all know as IAM privileges, or kind of simply put, permissions of users or machine identity service accounts, applications within those modern production environments. Now, this is a very surprising fact, and I think many people in the industry were surprised by that. Fortunately, we at Ermetic have actually done some own research 2 years back, before we founded the company. We actually conducted a large survey of 300 US-based CISOs and cloud security practitioners. We've done this survey together with IDC, the consulting group, which allowed us to survey organizations of various sizes from 2,000 employees to 100,000 employees across a variety of industries, so insurance, banking, pharmaceuticals, retail, technology, internet, telcos, and whatnot. And it came pretty much open across all the players in the industry that lack of visibility into identity and access management configurations and permissions, and improper management and challenges with managing IAM is a very common concern and definitely top of mind for many security practitioners. And that was a premise kind of for us at Ermetic to start building our technology and bringing that to the market, because we really believe that it allows organizations to address some of their greatest challenges. And as you will be able to hear from Guy, a great friend and also a customer of our technology, you will be able to hear from him directly how their organization is actually leveraging this technology to cope with some of these big challenges they have in securing their large-scale production environments in AWS and GCP and other cloud providers. Now, because this is becoming a hot topic over the past year, the leading analyst groups have created a new category for that. And Gartner called this category CIM, which stands for Cloud Infrastructure Entitlement Management. Forrester call it a little bit differently. They call it Cloud Identity Governance. And we at Ermetic are proud to be one of the leading vendors in these categories, alongside with the more traditional, although there is actually nothing traditional in terms of public cloud security, but older or more well-established categories of cyber or cloud security products such as CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management, or CWPP, Cloud Workload Protection. So there is this new category where we are again proud to be one of the leading vendors. So maybe you might want to ask yourself, what is it all about? Why are there challenges in managing permission in the public cloud? So please allow me to go back to this classical, it's already become a classic case study of the Capital One breach, which took place almost a year and a half ago, I think in June 2019. It recently made headlines again because Capital One was actually fined by the regulators. It wasn't a huge amount for Capital One. It was, I think, sub $100 million of fine, but definitely something that made headlines across the industry because people are aware of this regulatory risk as well. Now, before we go into the example, it's very important to say that Capital One are an outstanding institution. They were the first large-scale financial institution to go all out public cloud. They have actually recently published that they closed their last data center, and they're entirely in the public cloud today, predominantly in AWS, I believe. And they've done an amazing job in opening the path for many other companies to go to the public cloud. And unfortunately, what happened to them as part of this breach is something that often happens to these trailblazers that kind of open the path for the industry to follow through. They really were a very courageous institution, and they have an outstanding security and technology team coping with this great challenge of securing large infrastructures in the public cloud. And also the transparency and the way they came out and about with the breach and sharing this information with the industry, what allowed us all to evolve and gave great ideas to us in how we should be building our technologies, and gave a lot of good ideas to other companies in the industry how they could protect their environments better. Now, with that, having said that, let's go and talk maybe a little bit about the technical details. So the essence of that breach was an application, a vulnerable application. Like, every good application sometimes becomes vulnerable as new vulnerabilities are discovered. And this application was running on EC2, which is an AWS word for a virtual machine within the Capital One AWS environment. And because this application was serving customers or had to be open for the business use to the internet, it was exposed to the internet, and the threat actor was able to scan this application and identify the vulnerability. And after the vulnerability was identified, the threat actor was able to exploit that vulnerability and take control over this specific EC2, this specific machine. Now, so far so good. These types of compromises happen to organizations that operate in the public cloud pretty often, because again, you have all these autonomous scanners that scan all publicly exposed IP addresses and all publicly exposed ports all the time, looking for vulnerabilities. In many cases, those vulnerabilities are exploited automatically. And in many cases, even in the vast majority of cases, even if a machine is compromised, it all ends up by some random crypto miner or Bitcoin miner being deployed on that machine, stealing some CPU time from the organization. Of course, there is a risk, but again, it's contained to, and the blast radius of the attack is usually contained to this one EC2 or whatnot. Now, in this case, the threat actor was a little bit more sophisticated, and once landing on that machine, what the person has done is basically look for what identities or permissions this machine had within the broader AWS environment, right? And this is a basic reconnaissance activity that the more sophisticated threat actors are likely to do. Now, it was immediately obvious to the attacker that this machine, this EC2, could assume a role. A role is just a name for an identity that this machine had within the AWS environment. Now, why do machines need identities, you might ask? Now, The answer is pretty obvious. Those are the users or the accounts, the service accounts, or the identity these applications are using to access databases, to access storage services, and whatnot, and many other resources in the environment. So in this case, this machine had an identity, and this identity was very privileged. It actually had the permission to read data from across 700 S3 buckets, storage services within the Capital One environment, right? And the moment the attacker took control over the identity, the person could actually access those buckets from anywhere in the world directly. Now, this exemplifies the importance of securing your identities in the public cloud, because if you compare that to an on-prem situation, for someone external to your organization to get access to your storage services, this person would have to VPN into your environment. They would probably land in some subnet. They would have to move laterally through your firewalls from that subnet somehow to your data center, and then hopefully get access to the storage service, get the data, and then exfiltrate it out. Now, in the public cloud, you don't have all that networking perimeter, at least not in the way we used to have that on-prem. Some services like S3, for example, are exposed to anyone in the world. And the moment you have the identity and you have the permissions, you can access those services virtually from anywhere in the world. And this is exactly what happened here. The threat actor was able to access those virtual storage services from behind a Tor VPN. And because we're talking about public cloud, once the person had the permissions, they were basically able to copy, list the buckets and copy all the sensitive data out within the matter of minutes, right? Which is something that is unprecedented in the on-prem environment. And again, this exemplifies why you have to really protect your privileged identities. Now, in this specific case, not only that this identity was privileged, and a privileged identity was connected to an internet-facing application or internet-facing machine, which by itself a risk, and this risk could be remediated, for example, by detaching the privileged identity from the machine or by blocking this machine from internet access. But in this specific scenario, this privileged identity was what we call over-provisioned. It means that these privileged permissions were not required for the application to do its business function. And we know that because this machine has never used those privileged permissions in its throughout its entire operation. So basically, if Capital One had the capability to achieve what we all knew as the principle of least privilege, meaning that users or applications in this case have access only to the resources they absolutely require, clearly this attack would never have been able to succeed. Of course, what would have happened is that once the machine was compromised, the threat actor could look at the identity, but the identity would never allow the threat actor to access all those sensitive storage services containing over 100 million consumer credit applications of US citizens was all their PII, and probably Capital One would never have ended up within being fined or in the Congress inquiry it had to go through, and so on and so forth. So just to sum up that scenario, you have to be able to govern your identities in the public cloud environments and protect those identities. This is very important. This was important in the on-prem environment, and it's even more important in the cloud environment. So to do that, you have to be able to identify all your privileged identities. You have to understand which of those privileged identities are at risk because they are connected to machines that are exposed to the internet, or, for example, belong to users that do not have MFA enabled or have an access key that is not rotated properly and things like that. And beyond that, you have to be able to identify which of your privileged identities are actually over-provisioned, meaning they have permissions that they do not require for their normal business function, and be able to remove all those excessive permissions, hopefully automatically in real time, and therefore minimize the potential attack surface for adversaries. In this scenario, for example, limiting the permissions of this identity to its business function would have prevented the threat actor from moving laterally from that compromised virtual server into the environment towards the sensitive resources and minimizing the blast radius to the one machine that was actually compromised. Now, what do we help, and how does Hermetic helps customers solve some of their common challenges? So first of all, we are helping you quantify your identity and access management risks. So I hope that the Capital One examples made you think about those risks if you were not aware of them, but how you actually are able to quantify how much risk you have within IAM. And exactly this is where we are coming into the story. We help you understand how many privileged identities do you have, how many of those privileged identities or all your identities are over provisioned, what is the percentage of excessive permissions out of the entirety of permissions you might have within your environment, how many of those permissions are linked to exposed machines, how many of those permissions are linked to potentially vulnerable users, and so on and so forth. We also help organizations resolve organizational disconnects and solve some of the organizational challenges that companies are facing as they're moving to the public cloud. Consider an organization that's operating in the public cloud. Who is responsible for addressing those IAM risks? Is it the IAM team? Is it the cloud security team? Is it someone from the compliance team? These are all, of course, great questions. And we help organizations by leveraging our technology, build a great process around remediating, understanding and remediating those risks that brings together the IAM people, the cloud security people, the product and DevOps teams, bring them all together and allow them and enable them solve those risks automatically. What's also important is that we allow people that are not experts in, for example, AWS or GCP IAM, address some of those challenges because we're able to visualize for them the permissions and the resources and the access controls in a very user-friendly way. So, for example, if you have an AWS expert person in your organization, you now onboarding GCP, you can trust your AWS expert to do the work also across your GCP environment because our product speaks in a very natural, user-friendly language. So someone who is not a GCP expert can do that work in GCP as well. Another common challenge that we see organizations facing in the public cloud when we talk about permissions and identity governance is everything that has to do with third-party access. In the public cloud, we have so many great vendors that help us do our job better. Some of those vendors give us, observability to our environment, like Datadog, for example. Some vendors give us the capability to optimize our usage of the public cloud and minimize our spend and tickets for public cloud, minimize our cost. So they basically monitor our usage of virtual machines and other resources and allow us to optimize all that. There are security vendors like Hermetic and many great others that connect to your environment to give you security value. Now, a basic question to ask here, do you have good visibility into all these third parties that connect to your environment? And if you have visibility to all the third parties, do you really understand the privileges that these third parties have in your environment? And what we've seen, unfortunately, across the industry, across many of the organizations we looked at, is that sometimes they give third-party access to their environment, and they don't always realize that this access is actually pretty privileged. It might not be, administrator access or full admin rights, but there might be a small permission hiding in that long configuration file that actually allows the third party to escalate its privilege to almost a full admin or to a power user or actually to a full admin. Now, the legitimate third party will never do that, of course, but there is always a risk that your third party will be compromised one day. And we all know about the famous Target breach story, right? And in this case, if this third party is compromised, you can trust the threat actor to actually go ahead and escalate their privilege to full admin. And the moment the threat actor has full admin to your public cloud environment, this is, by and large, game over, because it's not only that they have the ability to access your sensitive data and exfiltrate it out, but it's even more than that. They can actually pretty easily turn down your entire infrastructure. They can bring up new machines and harvest more Bitcoin and whatnot. Another thing that is very important, and we've seen that I think in the Capital One story, is how do you manage and govern machine identity permissions, right? You have an identity that is linked to a compute resource. That could be a virtual server, that could be a serverless function or a container. How do you understand what permissions it has, which resources this machine or application can access? Does it require that access, and so on and so forth? So these are some of the great use cases, but it's not only about machine identities. Of course, you still have your own users. You have developers connecting to production environments. You have DevOps personnel. You have security personnel. What permissions do they have? Can they turn off your VPCs tomorrow or something like that? And of course, if you want to protect access to sensitive resources, the first step to start from is just by analyzing who has access to those resources. Maybe you have over-provisioned those resources, and suddenly your entire environment has access to all your sensitive keys or your most sensitive databases. Now, it's not only about security, because today with the new privacy and compliance regulations that come out more often, and we have the GDPR and we have the CCPA, all those compliance regulations require us, and by the way, I know that as an organization, although we're a security company, we have to abide by those regulations as well. And as part of the regulatory and compliance process, we have to prove to the regulator that we have the ability to tell who within our organization has access to sensitive data or to PII. And this is, of course, a problem that is relevant to any organization. This is not even a security, this is a basic compliance question. Now, unfortunately, in modern public cloud production environments, understanding who are all the identities that have access to a specific sensitive resource is in itself a very challenging problem. For example, take a simple resource in AWS like an S3 bucket. It sounds very simple, right? Like, give me the list of all the identities that have permissions to access this bucket, and what permissions do exactly they have. But it turns out that in AWS, this is actually a pretty complex computational question, because there are so many ways you can grant those permissions. You can put them on the resource, you can put them on the identity, there are service control policies, boundaries, conditions, and the list goes on and on and on. And to be able to solve for that problem, you really need an automated tool that specializes in that. And this is just a very basic compliance question. So these are kind of some of the common challenges we see across the industry, and we are fortunate to be able to help our customers address some of those challenges. I do encourage all the participants to kind of ask us on the chat if you have any questions about that. If some of those challenges resonate with you more than others, I would be very happy to focus on those specifically as we go through the demo later in the presentation. So let me maybe sum that up quickly. What are the capabilities that we're bringing to the table? First of all, we're giving full visibility into your IAM posture. We are basically able to help you answer some basic questions around IAM, like who can access what. You can pick up any identity, and that could be an IAM user, that could be a federated user, or a machine application identity. And you can easily discover what are all the resources this identity can access, what permissions does it have, which permissions is it using, which permissions it doesn't use, and so on and so forth. You can flip the coin. You can take a resource perspective, as we just said, and ask yourself who has access to that S3 bucket, or who can read data from that database, who can turn off this VPC, who can turn on this EC2, and so on and so forth. Then we actually combine the static view of the permissions and the configuration with the dynamic view of the activity in the environment, which allows us to answer more complex questions like who are all my privileged users? What is the risk that is associated with a specific third parties? What permissions does a specific application require? And so on and so forth. And on top of that, we are allowing you to enforce organizational-wide policies that actually allow you, for example, to remove stale access from identities, remediate over-provisioned users, reduce risk that is associated with some of your privileged identities, or not to allow this risk to appear to begin with. So it's visibility, analytics, and enforcement, which allows us to kind of help our organizations solve 360 degrees of their identity-related risks. Now, with that, I would like to return the mic to my great friend and colleague, Guy Flechter, the Chief Security Officer and DPO of AppsFlyer. Please, Guy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Eric, for inviting me and the rest of the team. So I would take a few minutes to talk about the use case of us partnership with Hermetic and what we're doing with them. We'll talk about the concept and why we decided to go with Hermetic and on our entire approach to this decision. So I hope that this session will be interesting and nobody will fall asleep. So, and in addition to that, what we're going to talk about, it's not like in a far away galaxy. It's not like in something that is not close to us or everybody in this call. So Eric, you can move to the next slide. So and to the next slide. So a little bit about AppsFlyer. I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with AppsFlyer. Is the biggest mobile attribution analytics company. Basically, we assist our company to measure the success of their campaign with their advertisement initiative all across different channels that they're using, whether it's Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, and everything. And then they can measure the ROI and based on that improve their offering to their customers. A little bit about AppsFlyer in numbers. So we are a very big company, more than 1,000 employees. We support more than 75,000 marketers across the globe, more than 5,000 partners, and the environment is super, you can say, very active. We monitor more than 7 billion devices with our SDK, and we have more than 100 billion mobile action measured each month. From a cloud perspective, we are a fully cloud company. We're born in the cloud, raised in the cloud. We don't have any on-prem server or whatsoever. We basically utilizing all the major public cloud provider, AWS, GCP, AliCloud, Azure, and everybody across different countries. In addition to that, we have more than 15,000 different instances, again, in the different regions that we are utilizing. And on top of that, data that is being transferred to us is more than 80 tera of data on a daily basis. But the important number that led us to this partnership with Hermetic, on top of what I just showed you on the different environment and the amount of servers, is the number of developers. The amount of developers, which is today more than 300, is caused us and made us think how we can support it. Eventually, the developers need to do some stuff in different environment, and their services need to consume different permission and different solution and different authorization capabilities in order to do their work. And as you know, the security team is always outnumbered. I'm not sure if everybody here from the participant coming from security team or from the DevOps team or from other team, but as you know, the security team is always outnumbered the developers and the entire engineering team. Eric, can you move the next slide? So and on top of that, the environment is or the concept of our environment is always to release, is what is eventually leads to the fact that we need to move fast. Everybody need to move fast, and everybody need to always change stuff and always to do something new in the environment. And if you, for the previous slide on the number of developers, the amount of instances, the different cloud provider, everything is super chaotic, and the security team is trying to help or to support this movement forward to the entire organization. Eventually, the company need to release new features, new capabilities, updates to the service, which is a SaaS service eventually. So it's led us to few more slides, Eric. Another one. To have a plan, but no, one more back. We had a plan, and we thought that to working together with the developers and think about how to do stuff and guide them and give them documentation to do stuff, and eventually we understood that giving great guidance and even do a lot of visibility activities is great, but it's not going to support our scaling, and will not help us to support the engineering team to do their job and to move fast, like I said in the previous slides. So this is why our approach to the entire security is to provide guardrails and not gates. And using Hermetic, we want to do it fast and very easily. And next slide. And we understand that security work is not special. So we need to make sure that it's planned the same as other engineering work, and we need to support the engineering work the same thing. And we don't want to be unique about how we do stuff and the fact that we are not connected to the day-to-day work and everything that they are supporting. So how do we do it? So if you think of environment that contains from different stuff and from network, for health, dependencies, secrets, host images, container images, and the service itself, and the load balancer and everything, the S3 it's connected, and all around it, our main approach is to see how we can support all this extensive environment, and to support the engineering team to do their job and to focus on the service itself and give them everything that they need around it without any special requirements to hold them back, and without any need for them to stop to do their job. And this is why our approach is to give them as much as cover and as possible, and this is what it's connected to the guardrails. Basically, we want to make sure that the AWS account is okay, the security groups and IAM configuration is okay, the network is okay, everything up to the new service is okay, and all the connection, all the network, everything is okay to support the development team or the engineering team to do their job and to focus on the new service. They don't need to think about, will my IAM role will be sufficient and will not uh, bypass any security requirement. I don't need them to think about it. I need to make sure that they will get what they need to do. And if there is something that is not properly aligned to what we need, then automatically we will finish it and or not finish it and fix it and allow the developer to continue to do his job, because from his perspective we didn't do anything to his service, to his day-to-day activity. We reduce his permission to what he needs to do without impacting him. And Hermetic assists us in that matter because they support in many aspects of what we want to achieve, and the fact that they're supporting the AWS account from CIS perspective, they're looking on the IAM configuration and supporting all the network activities, the logs, the secret, the connection of load balancer and everything around it in a very easy way. And but on top of that, they are helping us to do it automatically in a very minimal manual processes. And by allowing this to be automatically, this is helping us to scale up security. In a previous slide, this is what I talk about the outnumber. The ability to overcome the outnumber is to support the any security activity, any development or any engineering activity automatically, and reducing manual processes will eventually support security and engineering to be better in what they need to do. So we deploy Hermetic on all our environments. They are now connected to all the cloud environments and monitoring them and providing us amazing visibility into everything that I mentioned here. And also they are doing all the automatic processes of reducing, notifying the developer, Jira tickets, and everything around it to support the security team, which is, although it's nice amount of people, we have 12 people, but still, like I said, we have 300 and more developers, and Hermetic assists us in this scaling up of security into the day-to-day activity of the engineering team. With that, the next slide. It's super important to when you pick the solution, or whether it's Hermetic or whether it's other solution, make sure that you're not picking the one that is only providing you the visibility or help you to check the box. Make sure that you pick a solution that will assist you to achieve the security that you want to achieve, and help you to in the process itself. I encounter in my 20s career numerous amount of solution, different aspects that you know you tick the box and great, I have this capability, and it leads to like in this not a real Yoda sentence, to a false sense of security. and the decision to go with Hermetic, that we saw that Hermetic not only provide us the visibility and the insights to what is happening inside our environment, they actually help us in the process of being better around it. And this is super important for everybody, that we're going to pick the right solution for them, whether it's Hermetic or whether it will be other solution. Pick the solution that will not only give you a false sense of security by giving you maybe great visibility, but also will support you with the right process to fix it and to scale up it, and to scale it up to the entire engineering groups. With that, I know we have a poll that it's going to be shared with everybody. Mitch?
Yeah, we sure do. This is Mitch just jumping back in. Great presentation, both of you. Let's we have a poll we'd like to share with everyone, so I'm going to put that up on the screen now. And would love everybody to just take a moment. Real easy one to fill out. Who is responsible for securing cloud infrastructure in your organization? So we'll take just a few moments. We're already getting some responses. Boy, they're piling in fast. I think that's the good news. Everybody knows who it is, at least so far. So we're getting pretty good responses here. We'll let some more folks vote. Please jump in while we're doing this. And we're going to take a look at the results, let you guys comment that on that. And then I think you're going to spend a little bit of time on a demo here. So as soon as we're into this just a bit more. Really fascinating. And it was great to hear, from the AppsFlyer, your perspective. Of course, Guy from AppsFlyer. Living in the cloud, once you've been in there, you certainly learned some lessons, no doubt about that. Looks like we've kind of tailed off on our people voting. So let me go ahead and close the poll and share that with everyone. We'll close it in 3, 2, last chance, 1. Okay, let's share our results. All right, that's up on the screen. Looks like security team is about 50%, developers a third, 11% DevOps, and 6% 6% other. Curious, is that consistent with what you both might have expected, or a little different?
I think that it's the common knowledge that the security team is more in charge of the securing the cloud infrastructure, but I think that maybe they are responsible from the general perspective of security, but protecting the cloud infrastructure and making sure that all the resources are aligned. It's also on the hands of DevOps and developers. Eventually, developers provide their services, the permission, and DevOps in charge of the configuration of the accounts and everything. So the security team can be responsible for a lot of stuff, but if the DevOps and developers will not support it, you can do it by yourself. But like I said, you need to provide them the right capability to do it, and you need to be part of their processes. If you are coming in, in very high and say, yeah, you need to make sure that your AWS account is secure and aligned to CIS benchmark, and with no real operational aspect of this requirement, then eventually they will not do it because they will say, oh, great, now what? What do I need to do? How do I need to do it? And so on.
Well, I know we have a demo to get to here. If it's all right, I'm going to go ahead and pull that back down and hand it back to you both.
Great, thanks, Mitch. So I'm shifting to the demo. Can you all see the demo environment now?
Yeah, yep, we can see it. Looks great.
Perfect. So what you have here is the demonstration environment of the Hermetic platform. So basically, this is part of the Hermetic product. For the purposes of this specific demonstration, we set up a small demonstration environment. It's an AWS environment. It has one organization, 2 accounts. You can see that this is a relatively small environment. Of course, nothing even remotely close to what organizations like AppsFlyer have with thousands of or tens of thousands of workloads in the cloud. This is a pretty small environment. It has some IAM users, roles, run 150 compute resources, so EC2, serverless, whatnot, and then the variety of data resources you might find and networking. What's interesting here, I think, is to start from this number, which shows you that even in a tiny environment, the number of entitlements and permissions one might see scales up exponentially and astronomically. So even in a tiny environment, we're talking about 500,000 permissions enabled across those identities and these resources. Now, in real life production environments like the one that AppsFlyer has, but many other organizations that we're working with, we see this number getting easily into the tens of millions, and in some cases even into the hundreds of millions of permissions. Of course, analyzing those permissions and understanding which are risky, which are excessive, which should be removed is a very challenging task. And what you see here is a summary of that work, where we're basically showing you that in this environment you have close to 500,000 of permissions, and 88% of those permissions are actually not used and not likely to be used in the future. That's why we call them excessive permissions. And by the way, the number 88% might sound extremely, alarmingly large, but this is not far from what we see in the industry overall, where the number is ranging somewhere between 80 to 90%. Some organizations do better than others, so they're in the 70s or in the 60s, but by and large, the number ranges somewhere between 80 and 90%, 80 and 90. Now, of course, you cannot go ahead and automatically remediate all those permissions. There is some process that we allow you to build around that. And the first step of that process is, of course, to prioritize. You have to be able to start from the most risky permissions first. And this is what we also giving you here, where we are basically able to tell you, look, only 9% of those permissions, so less than 50,000 permissions, are actually the ones that are risky and pose greater risk to your environment and should be remediated first. We also give you more visibility into general security misconfiguration and also to publicly exposed resources, and we can talk about that at some other time, and we're happy to kind of engage everyone on this call later. I would like to give you some visibility use cases here. So we talked about our capabilities across visibility, analytics, and enforcement. So I want to start from visibility, where basically we can go to the inventory and we can look at all the identities. I want to pick up machine identities, so I'm going to roles. So these are all the roles that we have in the environment, and I want to look at a role that is actually pretty active. So I'm going to pick up a role here. So you get a little bit more information about the role. I'm going to skip the risks just for a second, and I want to go to the permissions tab. Now, the permission tab is where we are able to visually show you the permissions that this identity has. We talked about the appealing, easy visualization of the permissions. So this is where we have it. So basically, you can see this is the identity. This is the machine identity, the role that lives within that AWS environment. Here you can see all the resources that are actually able to assume that identity. So you see there is an EC2 instance that's using that identity, and you also have a Beanstalk application, a different type of a compute resources, a resource that's using that identity. And you can see the identity here, and you can see all the permissions that are attached to that identity. So in fact, this identity has an administrator access policy attached to that. And you can easily see the configuration, but in fact, it's action star, resource star. So basically allowing you to do any action on any resource. So this is an administrator. And from here, you can see all the resources and services this identity has access to via a combination of this administrator access policy and other policies. Those could be a resource-based policy like an S3 bucket policy. That could be a resource-based policy like a KMS policy and others. Now, if you want to see what permissions exactly this identity has to those 5 keys, all you have to do is go and view permissions, and then for each key, you see exactly the permission this identity has and whether those permissions are used or not. In this case, all the permissions to these resources are actually excessive. So this is an example of a visibility case where you can see all the permission that a specific resource has. You can also look at the list view where instead of the graphical view where you can see all the services this identity has access to, and for each service you can see all the resources. So for example, under EC2 you can see all the actual machines, and for each machine you can see exactly the permissions that are in place and which permissions are used and which are not. Again, from here I want to jump quickly to show you some of the analytics and enforcement use cases. So one thing is to show you all that this identity has all these permissions and which permissions are used and which are not. But the more complex thing is actually to automatically identify, and this is the analytics part, that this identity has excessive permission. So this is what we're doing by generating those risks. So we look at all the identities and all the resources, and we automatically create those risks for overall privileged identities and resources. So in this case, you see that this risk tells you, in fact, that this specific identity has a bunch of excessive permissions. It has access to all AWS services. This is obvious because it has an administrator access policy, but it's in fact only using 6 of these services and only some permissions on some of these services. So for example, on S3 or IAM, it's not using all the permissions, it's using only part of the permission. So this is the actual analytics part. And now let's see the enforcement part, where we are actually able to give you an automatic way of removing all those excessive permissions. So let's open that risk up in, and what you get here is a little bit, what you're able to get here is a little bit more information again about this identity. You see how many permissions it has and how many resources, which permissions it's actually using, which resources it has access to, which permissions it's using on which services. You can again see the access graph that we've seen before. And by the way, you can zoom in on some interesting things. So for example, you want to ask yourself, do I have cross-account access? So you remember we have 2 accounts in this environment, account 1, account 2, and account 3. And this identity lives in account 3. And by clicking on cross account, you see all the resources actually in the other account that this identity has access to, and so on and so forth. And now the enforcement part, where we are basically telling you, look, this is the policy you have today, administrator access, but this is the policy. So this is the policy, very simple, action star, resource star. And this is the policy we are recommending you to put in place because these are the only permissions that this identity is actually using. So it's using all the permissions on ECS, but it's using only pass role permission on IAM. So these are the only permissions that should be allowed. And on S3, for example, it's using only get object permission on a specific resource. So actually by implementing this policy instead of the original policy, we're able to limit all the permissions that this identity has and align those permissions to the actual activity this identity is doing. And you can either download that policy and implement that in JSON or Terraform configuration on CloudFormation, or you can just click remediate, and by hitting remediate, we're able to connect to your AWS or GCP or Azure environment via API and do this remediation automatically for you. So this is basically how we allow you to enforce less privilege in your environment by removing all those excessive permissions. Now, before we sum up, I just want to show you, just go back to the risk and show you a little bit more. So you can see that this identity both has high privileges, but there is something else. This identity is also linked to a public machine. So let's look at the machine this identity is connected to. So we've seen before that is it is actually used by, let's go to the info. No, let's go to the permission tab. We know that this identity is used by this EC2 instance, and let's go to the EC2 instance profile. So we're actually moving from the identity profile to the profile of this specific EC2. By the way, if we look at the permission graph here, again, we will see that this EC2 is actually using this identity. Like in the Capital One scenario, there is an EC2 and it's using a machine identity. And this machine identity is admin. It's a privileged identity in the environment. Now, by going to the networking tab, you can actually see how this machine is exposed, whether this machine is exposed to the internet and what ports are exposed to. Actually, you can see that this machine is exposed on port 22, which is an SSH, an admin port, to any IP address externally via a specific security group and a specific internet gateway. So this is exactly the case, and we're visualizing that for you very simply of an internet-facing machine, an internet-facing application that exposes a management port and potentially could be compromised. And this machine also has a privileged permission in the environment, as you can see here. That's why on this machine, we are actually raising two risks. One is talking about the fact that this machine has the privileged permission and excessive permissions in this case, and this machine is also publicly accessible. So this is actually showing you a little bit more of the visibility and how we're able to connect the story of the privileged identities and excessive permissions also to the story of internet-facing applications, like we've seen in the Capital One case study. So with that, I would really like to bring that to a closure, and Mitch, bring that back to you, please.
All righty, great demo. Love the visual nature of it too. That's fantastic. It's very cool. So let's see if we can jump to, we have time for maybe 2 questions. First, let me ask this one about the difference between managing human identities versus services. You mentioned also hardware. Now, how do you handle those things differently? Are they pretty much look the same, or are there some other things to consider?
No, so this is a terrific question. Of course, there are similarities, but there are also differences. We know that based on our experience, but there is also academic studies that say that machine identities and applications in general tend to be a little bit more predictive in their nature. They use the same operation over and over again at specific time periods and so on and so forth, while human users tend to be a little bit more sporadic and a little bit less predictable. That's why we do a little bit of different analytics when trying to understand and derive from historical permissions into the future performance and activities. We look at different periods of time for applications and for human users. For human users, we're also advocating more just-in-time access and things like that. They're also part of our solution.
Cool. Yeah, I really like this next question. I'm just trying to squeeze these in as much as we can. They're asking about automated deployment using Ameritech. Irmatic, sorry, it's a bad day. They're asking how it fits into a tool chain in a DevOps cycle. Can you talk a little bit how that might work?
Sure, absolutely. So basically the deployment is very easy. We're a SaaS solution. We integrate to your public cloud environments via an API. The deployment can take minutes, even in environments that have hundreds of accounts. And once we're integrated, again, you can consume the information from the UI. We're also support numerous integrations, like Guy mentioned. They are using Jira pretty extensively, and also Slack and Splunk. But there are also other integrations, and we also, we also offer RESTful APIs that can integrate to your other instances in the public cloud environment, that can pull information out, pull out the risk, pull out the visibility, and feed that into other systems in the environment.
Excellent, cool. I'm sure a lot of folks are wondering about that. Well, we're just about a minute away from the top of the hour. I want to thank you both for a fantastic presentation, discussion, demonstration. That was super helpful. And we appreciate the questions from the audience. Any of those we didn't get to, we'll be happy to respond to you offline. Do want to also announce the winner of our 4 gift cards today. 4 winners are Eric F., Robert P., Tom T., and Alenda T. So the folks here at Security Boulevard, DevOps.com will reach out to you about getting a hold of those gift certificates. So just a reminder, we did record the webinar today, so that recording will show up in a link in an email to all participants, as well as a link to the slides that we used today. So be sure to check out securityboulevard.com for other exciting content. We really appreciate both of our speakers today, Guy Flechter, who's with AppsFlyer, and Eric Gumanowski, who is with Airmatic. Thank you very much for spending your time with us. We know your time's valuable. The fact that you would spend an hour of it with us, we're frankly honored. We appreciate it very much. We hope everyone is safe. Please be well and be careful. We'll speak to you soon.